I'm here to take you through a comprehensive preview of NBA player picks for all 8 upcoming games on this slate. We use this analysis and cashed out players on LaMelo, Jokic, Maxey, Banchero, DeJounte Murray, finishing 2.7 units profit from our last video. So stick around for the recap at the end of this, and I'll take you through all the lessons learned from our losses. I'll be going through all the players who've had a good and bad matchup to help you with your selections, and I'll be sharing a few bets that I've already placed. As always, I'll be sharing my screen, taking you through each player's props and their form lines. I use props.cash to sort through all of this data, and I've got a special discount code for all of my viewers. So sign up today and get 25% off your first month by using the code DAFT25 when you sign up. Let's go! First up, we've got the Milwaukee Bucks versus Detroit Pistons. We're looking at an under in Killian Hayes assists here, so under 6.5. The Bucks allow the fourth fewest assists to point guards over the last 15 games. Looking at Killian Hayes, he's hit this line in 4 of 10, so he's gone under 6 out of the 10 games. His recent form is quite good, hitting in 4 of his last 5. But looking at head-to-head matchups against the Bucks, he's gone under in 5 straight games. And I get that Cade Cunningham most likely played in these games, but instead of guessing, let's just double check. With Cade Cunningham, he played 4 of those games. He went under in all 4. And without Cade Cunningham, he finished with 5. So the matchup is good. The form against the opponent is good, leaning to the under. His recent form leaves me a little bit skeptical, the fact that he's gone over. But at the same time, the Bucks are slowly improving, but they're still shit defensively. So, but 6.5, quite a high line for someone like Killian Hayes. He's done it recently, but can he sustain that against a good matchup? Only time will tell. The next one is for Bojan Bogdanovic, and we're looking at under 18.5 points, and that's because the Bucks allow the second fewest points to small forwards. Now, in this particular case, his form lines are pretty good. He's hit this line in 6 of his last 10, averaging 20 points. In head-to-head matchups, he's done quite well. He's covered in 3 of his last 4, averaging 23.5 points. So when it comes to small forwards, power forwards, I don't usually lean too much into the matchup data. The reason being is basketball is more positionless now than it ever has been. And especially with 3s and 4s, they swap positions all the time. So if you look at power forwards, for example, I think the Bucks allow, I think they're top 5 in power forwards in points allowed. So if Bogey's playing there, chances are he could go over. So for this particular play, if I was going to play a Bogdanovic one, I would be looking at the over. I've told this matchup to go F itself. The next one, though. Jalen Duren, we're sticking with the Pistons first. Looking at the over in Jalen Duren's points and assist line here. So it's 17.5. The Bucks, they allow the 4th most points and assists to centers. We can see that Jalen Duren recently has covered this in 6 straight games. He's covered in 8 of his last 10, averaging 19.5. In head-to-head matchups, he's done well, covered in 2 of his last 3. So the matchup is great. His form against the opponent is pretty solid, and his recent form has been great too. We know that Isaiah Stewart's out. We know that they traded Marvin Bagley. So provided that Jalen Duren doesn't get into foul trouble, he could see some extra minutes here. So I really do like this play. This is definitely one of the bets that I'm going to be taking, unless I find a reason not to in the next hour or two. But right now, pretty confident I'm going to be taking it. But check the pinned comment by the time this is uploaded, and you'll get to see what I've landed on. So that's Jalen Duren. The next one, though, I like this play as well. It's Dame Lillard over 6.5 assists. The Pistons allow the second most assists to point guards. We know that Dame's capable of getting 10. Sometimes he doesn't, but Giannis will get it. But looking at his last 10, he's hit in 4 of those games. He's averaging 6 assists per game. In head-to-head matchups, he's averaging 7.5. These 2 games where he had 10 and 12 assists, he was a member of the Portland Trail Blazers. Since he's joined the Bucks, he's had assist lines of 3 and 5. So that enough is something I wasn't aware of before I started talking about it, but that's probably enough to scare me off from taking this play. So not going to touch the Dame assists unless we look at the under, but the matchup is too good to back him in the under there, unless you back Dame to go over. So check that out. In his 2 games against the Pistons, he scored 34 and 33 points. So he obviously had a lot of touches, decided to score more than pass. Could be a good value play. Dame over in points, over 30 points, and Dame under in assists. Who knows? We shall see. What else have we got? Malik Beasley pops up here. We're looking at his points prop. It's 10.5. And that's because the Pistons allow the most points to shooting guards over the last 15 games. Beasley only scored 10 points in his last matchup against the Pistons. These other two here were a very long time ago. But looking at his last 10 games, he's definitely capable of exploding, covering 6 of his last 10, averaging 11.7, but he's also capable of going well under. And those are really impacted not so much by his minutes, although they do go up and down, but it's his field goal attempts. He could have 12 one day, he could have 6 the next. So if he's getting his shots up, he'll definitely get it. The question is, will he get his shots up? I haven't looked into this yet, but for players like this, you want to go back, look at Detroit probably last 3 games, check the box scores, check out what the shooting guards who play a similar role to Malik Beasley, were they able to get their shots off? Do they have many attempts? That could be a good indicator for Malik Beasley. The next one is for Chris Middleton, and we're looking at his points and his assist line here, over 22.5. The Pistons allow the 4th most points and the most assists to small forwards. He's covered this line in 6 of his last 10 games, averaging 22.7 in head-to-head matchups, 12 and 39. Both of these games were last season. He hasn't played them yet this year. But looking back at his last 10, there was a game where he only played half. There was the blowout game where they destroyed Boston. So looking at his assists alone, so we know that the Pistons allow the most assists to small forwards. Chris Middleton at 6.5. Look, it potentially could happen. The Pistons are allowing a lot of points. That means there's a lot of assists to go around. But we know that Middleton's not the first option. It goes Dame, Giannis, and then if they can't create anything, then it's Chris Middleton's turn to do so. So he doesn't touch the ball enough for me to take his assist at this number, but the matchup is great. There's going to be a lot of points. I'll leave that up to you to decide. The next one, you can't have a Bucks game without a Giannis Antetokounmpo conversation. We're talking about his rebounds and assists here. We're actually looking at the under, which is crazy. So the Pistons allow the 4th least rebounds and the 2nd fewest assists to power forwards. Giannis's last 10 games, he's covered this 9 times. Like, it's unbelievable how easy he's covered it. So, you know, if you did see that, you'd probably jump right on it, right? Let's jump straight on the over because he's been killing it. The numbers tell us it's a bad matchup up against the Detroit Pistons, but looking at his head-to-head form tells us it's a bad matchup too. In 5 straight games against the Detroit Pistons, he's gone under his rebounds and assist prop. When I see something like that, I usually look a little bit further to figure out what it is. Is it his assists or is it his rebounds? I want you to think about it for a second before I put it on. Let's have a look. Assists. He's gone under his assists in 6.5 assist line. All 5 games against the Pistons. These 2 are from this year, 6 and 5. Rebound-wise, he's hit it before, but in both games this year, he went under his rebounds and he went under in his assists. So, very interesting. So, he's had 14 rebounds and assists in both games against the Pistons this year. I wonder if that means he's scoring a shitload of points. It doesn't. He's gone under in his points as well. So, even though the matchup says rebounds and assists are the go, PRA might even be better. He's got a PRA of almost 50. Well, it is 50, 49.5. He's yet to hit that against the Detroit Pistons in his last 5 games. Looking at his last 10, he's gone under this in 4 straight. So I'm not sure what the line is, but I'm assuming that it's a large one. There could be a blowout risk here. So Giannis under is definitely something that I'm going to consider. But knowing how good he is, nah, screw that. I think he's going to go under. Now, the more that I think about it, his points line is 31.5. I reckon I could take Giannis just for under points, under rebounds, under assists. You probably get that about $6.50. That's what's going through my mind at the moment. But I'll dive into that once I've finished this video, and I'll share my final picks in the pinned comment. All right, let's jump into the next game. It's the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Charlotte Hornets. So the first player we're looking at is LaMelo Ball. Data's telling us to look at it under of 35.5 points, rebounds, and assists. And that's because the 76ers allow the fewest points, the 6th least rebounds, and the least assists to point guards. So LaMelo Ball's been back from injury from 4 games now. And in those 4 games, we've seen his lines, PRA lines, drop. I was strongly considering this one for a few reasons. One, I don't know if you guys watched the game today, but LaMelo Ball seemed like he hurt himself in the first half. Still came out, played, finished the game, but they're on a back-to-back as well. He is on some sort of minutes restriction, as you can see here. He used to play up to between 35 and 40 minutes. Since his injury, hasn't played more than 32 minutes in a game. So they're monitoring his minutes. He's on a back-to-back. The matchup against the Philadelphia 76ers is a tough one. I'm strongly considering taking his unders and ignoring the fact that he's hit this 9 of his last 10 games. The only game he didn't hit it in was the game that he got injured in. So I'm strongly considering the under there on LaMelo Ball. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. But another player to talk through is Terry Rozier. And we're actually looking at his rebounds and assist prop here. And the 76ers allow the most rebounds and the third most assists to shooting guards. So we're looking at the over 9.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10, averaging 9.9. 4 games against the Philadelphia 76ers. It doesn't look promising. He's gone well under in his last 2. He's hit it once, and then he went under time prior. There could be a world, if I think about the script, where this does happen, though. If LaMelo does play less minutes or he is less effective because of the matchup, someone else needs to step up. So if there is a script out there, and there is a world where Terry hits this, but yeah, not enough for me to take right now. But the next player I'm looking at is Miles Bridges, and we're looking at his points line first, and then we'll look at his rebounds line. So looking at his points line, 18.5 points. We're actually looking at an under here. The reason being the 76ers allow the least points to power forwards over the last 15 games. Miles Bridges has covered this line in 8 of his last 10, averaging 21.6. A lot of these, none of these the matchup's going to be as hard as it will be up against the Philadelphia 76ers. He's also on the back-to-back, of course. So I'm honestly not just surprised to see the graph like this for a lot of the Hornets players, because the ones who do have tough matchups, their lines are going to be a lot lower than what they average. So he averages 20.5 points per game this year. They set the line at 18.5. So what does that tell you? The sports books think he's going to have a difficult time in this game. So I guess what I'm saying is the matchup has already been factored into the line. But at 18.5, I wouldn't take that just because he averages 20. So I think the line's about right, to be honest. So I'm going to choose not to play it at the moment. I'll think about it. But you can see here in his last matchup against the 76ers, he only scored 9 points. He played 30 minutes and he shot the ball 14 times. So maybe that could influence you to take the under. I'm not too sure. But sticking with Miles Bridges, we're looking at his rebounds, and we're looking at over in rebounds. The 76ers allow the most rebounds to power forwards over the last 15. In that game where he shot terribly, he still collected 10 rebounds against the Philadelphia 76ers. Looking at his last 10, he's covered this in 6 of his last 10, averaging 6.7 rebounds per game. So his rebound line against the Spurs that just happened was 8.5, which I thought was bloody crazy. But that's because he had a great matchup. He's got a great matchup again today, but the line's gone down two rebounds less to 6.5. At the moment, I'm considering a potential under in points, over in rebounds for Bridges. I'm not too sure how I'd play that. But yeah, I do like his rebounds prop at this price, 6.5. It is a little bit juiced, but I do like his chances to get rebounds here. The next one, we're looking at Joel Embiid. So looking at his points and rebounds, not only is Joel Embiid probably the best center going around at the moment, the Hornets allow the most points and the second most rebounds to centers. So 46.5 is the line. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, though, check this out. 65, 51, and 57 against the Charlotte Hornets. So we're looking at 53 points, 38 points, and 42 points. Rebound-wise, 11.5, 13, and 15. So one value play, and I remember running this when the last time they versed the Charlotte Hornets, because it's a strategy I employ when Joel Embiid plays. It's basically an over in points, an over in rebounds, and it's an under in assist. Boom. Check that out. So he's gone under his assists all 3 games. He's gone over his rebounds in all 3 and over his points in all 3. Basically, the script in those games is that Joel Embiid is absolutely dominant. He's unstoppable. He gets all the rebounds, gets all the points. The 76ers are up by a large margin. It's a blowout. He doesn't play the fourth. He doesn't get the assists because he can get 30 points in by halftime. So that's a really strong lean for me at the moment to take that as a value play. But as always, just check those pinned comments. Points and rebounds, definitely a strong play, regardless if there's a blowout. I'll tell you why. Check this out. He's managed to do all this damage against the Charlotte Hornets. 2 of those 3 games, he played less than 30 minutes. Whereas if we compare it to his averages on the season, he's averaging 34 minutes per game. Up against the Hornets, down to 31. So if there is a blowout, he can still absolutely murder these lines, and he's got no one to stop him. So Joel Embiid, I'm really liking that one. The next one is for Tobias Harris. We're looking at it under in his points and his rebounds. And that's because the Hornets allow the fourth fewest points and the least rebounds to power forwards. He's hit this in 2 or 4, so he's always around there. Looking at his last 10, he's a bit inconsistent. 6 out of his last 10, 25.9 as an average. I don't like what I'm seeing here in and under, but again, the same principles apply. If the script does exist for this Philly game and the 76ers destroy them, Maxey and Joel Embiid handle the ball most of the time. Tobias Harris may not need to do much at all. So, not one that I'll be taking, but the data's there. Another one is for Kelly Oubre, and that's to take his under in points. So it's 12.5. The Hornets allow the fewest points to shooting guards, but 12.5 is very easy for Kelly Oubre to hit. He just needs to make a couple of threes, a layup, a dunk, whatever. But he's also up against his old team. So I don't know if he might get himself up for this game. But yeah, not one of the ones that I'm going to be playing. And then the last one is for Tyrese Maxey. And we're looking at his rebounds and assists. And that's because the Hornets allow the third most rebounds and the eighth most assists to point guards. He's hit this line in 4 of his last 10 games, averaging 9.8. In his last 2 head-to-head matchups against the Hornets, 4 and 9. The most recent one is the one I'd probably put a bit more stock into because that was this season. He finished on 9. If we do a breakup of what is what, he murdered his assists and he went well under in his rebounds. So, Maxi assists might be a good play, but I just can't stop thinking about the Joel Embiid one, to be honest. Let's jump into the next one, eh? We're jumping into the San Antonio Spurs versus the Washington Wizards. Quite a few players to get through here. Bit of a caveat. Tyus Jones and Trey Jones, they're twins, they're brothers. They're both starting on opposite sides. Their lines are almost identical. So I hope I don't fuck this one up. But the first one we're looking at is not Tyus Jones. We're looking at Trey Jones. So I'll get through all the Spurs players first. Now we're looking at Trey Jones over in his points and assists. And that's because the Spurs, actually not the Spurs. What am I talking about? I'm looking at the Washington players. Shit, I already confused myself. Tyus Jones, points and assists. The Spurs allow the most points and the 9th most assists to point guards. He's hit this in 2 or 4 games against the Spurs. Looking at his last 10, he's hit this 4 times. 19.3 as an average. Quick breakdown just so you want to see which one's gone better. His points line is inconsistent as hell, but in head-to-head matchups, he's covered his points line in 3 straight. Assists, he nailed them in their last game, gone under the 3 prior. Looking at his last 10 for assists, his recent form says assists. His form against the opponent says points. That tells me I don't know what I'm going to do with it. For the next player, though, sticking with the Washington Wizards, Denny Advian. We're looking at his rebounds, and that's because the Spurs allow the most rebounds to small forwards. Now, Denny, he's capable of smashing this number out. He's hit it in 5 of his last 10, averaging 7.9 rebounds. It is really dependent on matchups. He's capable of 14, 12, and 13. He's hit that in his last 10. It's crazy. In head-to-head matchups, he's averaging 10 rebounds per game, recording 9 and 11. If this guy finishes on 10 rebounds and I don't take it, I'm going to kick myself. But the matchup is great. He's done it against the Spurs before. In his last 10 games, he's shown that he very much is capable. The one thing I'm a little bit worried about is the addition of Marvin Bagley. So they made the trade with the Pistons to improve their rebounding, and Bagley's been excellent. He's definitely improved their rebounding. Does that mean Denny has less opportunities? I'm not too sure yet, but it's definitely something I'm going to be looking into. The next one's for Kyle Kuzma, and I promise you I'm not going to take this because I still hate Kyle Kuzma, but the over in his rebounds could be a good play because the Spurs allow the 5th most rebounds to power forwards. Now, Kyle Kuzma, that's 7.5. He's covered that in 5 of his last 10, averaging 6.8 rebounds per game. His last 5 games have been great. He's averaging 9.2 rebounds. In his last matchup against the Spurs, he only got 6. You suck, Kuzma. Victor Wembanyama. Will he play? Will he not? This is saying the status is out. Let me quickly jump on a RotoWire to see whether there's any updates on him, and he's out. So let's just jump past Victor Wembanyama. The next one is for Jeremy Sohan, and we're looking at his assist line in this one. Over 3.5. The Wizards allow the 8th most assists to power forwards. He got 5 assists the last time he versed them. In his last 10 games, he's hit this 7 times, averaging 3.9 per game. In his last 5, he's hit this 4 times, averaging 4.4 assists per game. How does he perform without Wemby?
it's not too bad. In his last 5 games without Wemby, he's averaging 5.2 assists per game. So this line is juiced though. So 4.5, you might get plus money for, and at 4.5, I won't be taking it. So Jeremy Sohan, in the bin you go. Devin Vassell from the San Antonio Spurs. Looking at his PRA here, he's got an excellent matchup. The Wizards allow the 4th most points, the 2nd most rebounds, and the 5th most assists to shooting guards. Now, Devin Vassell's only covered this line in 2 of his last 10. So what have you guys learned from me doing this every single night? When everything looks red, it's because the line's been moved up because the matchup is great. He hasn't got a head-to-head matchup against them, so we don't have too much to really rely on. His form, not great if you look at it that way. Form without Wemby, perfectly capable of smashing this line. So without Wemby, he's hit this in 4 of his last 10. We want to break it down to see whether it's his points, rebounds, or his assists. It could be a little bit of everything. So PRA might be the way to go. Or if this seems a bit too complicated, just to avoid it altogether, because there's a lot of other good plays out there. Sticking with the Jones brothers, let's hope I picked the right one. Looking at Trey Jones from the San Antonio Spurs, and we're looking at his assist line over 6.5. Now, the Wizards allow the 5th most assists to point guards. You can see he's covered this in 3 of his last 10. He's averaging 6 assists per game. But check this out. Up against his brother in the Washington Wizards, he's rattled off 9 and 12 assists. So some pretty crazy stats there. I think they're both going to have a big game. Can you imagine that? Trey Jones gets 10 assists because that's what he normally does against them. And then Tyus Jones goes crazy. I think it was points, wasn't it? It was points. Imagine Tyus Jones for 20 points, Trey Jones for 10 assists, the Jones multi, we could call it. I think you probably get $6 to $7 on that one. That'd be interesting. I probably won't play that. Actually, I'll have a look into it because I think that's pretty cool. But let's jump into the next game. There's no market available at the moment for the Cavs versus the Hawks, so we're getting straight into the Raptors versus the Knicks. The first player that we're looking at is Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, a lot of people are going to get on his rebounds in this game, and that's because his rebound form as of late has been excellent, right? His rebound form is great. The Raptors don't have a center. It's something that I'm going to look at, but I probably won't play. But for purposes of this deep dive, let's look at his points. And that's because the Raptors allow the 5th most points to centers. And a lot of that's due to being so small. Jakob Poeltl is still out. Now, Hartenstein's only hit this in 3 of his last 10, averaging 8.7 points per game. I'd ignore his head-to-head stats against them for the most part because he was playing off the bench for a lot of these games. And you can see it in his minutes. He actually would have been starting in his most recent matchup against them when he finished on 11 because his minutes were a lot higher in that game. So, yeah, Isaiah Hartenstein, he's hit it when he's had the minutes before. The matchup is good. We know that everybody else is going to be back in his rebounds. I won't be, but that's Isaiah. The next one is for Julius Randle. We're looking at his assists in this one. In his last 10 games, he's averaging 4.6 assists per game. He's covered his 4.5 assist line 7 times. The Raptors are the 4th most assists to power forwards. Look, if he's just going to be hitting it at these odds, minus 154, I'm not going to be taking it, I'll tell you that. Let's jump straight into the next one. It's OG Anunoby up against his former team after the trade. The Raptors allow the 5th most points to small forwards. OG over his last 4 games has really turned it on. You can see it here in the graph. But over his last 10, he's hit this 5 times. He's averaging 15 per game. Let me have a look at his minutes and shot attempts. His minutes have been sky high. Actually, I wanted to talk about this as a little bit of a warning. A lot of people might take OG because he's up against his old team. But I read a little article about how tired OG has been playing with the Knicks. And the caption was like, welcome to Thibs or welcome to New York or whatever it may be. Because Thibs is known to play his starters a lot of minutes. And check that out. Last 3 games for OG, played 43, 43, and 42.6 minutes, which is wild. So he's been getting tired, but it means there's going to be more opportunity. But I just want you guys to keep that in mind if anyone's going to back OG. The next player, though, is Jalen Brunson, and we're looking at his assists for this one. The Toronto Raptors allow the 4th most assists to point guards. You can see he's hit this in 6 of his last 10, averaging 8.1 assists. In head-to-head matchups, he's hit this 4 out of 6 games, including 2 games against them already this season, where he had 8 and 9 assists. So the matchup is good. Form against the opponent is good, and his form in his last 10 is okay. Look, I honestly probably wouldn't take Jalen Brunson at 7.5. I still feel like it's a 50-50 despite all that. But he might be someone to add to my parlays for 6 because he's hit 6 in 9 of his last 10 games. The only time he went under was up against Philly. Didn't he score like a shitload of points in that game? He didn't. Only 29. What am I talking about? But 9 of his last 10, he's covered 6. So I might consider that for some parlays. Sticking with assists and sticking with point guards, we're looking at Emmanuel Quickly over 5.5 assists. The line was at 4.5, but it started to move, but you can still get this at plus money. Now, Emmanuel Quickly and the Knicks allow the 7th most assists to point guards, so Quickly has a good matchup. Obviously, no head-to-head, but looking at his last 10, he's hit this 4 times, averaging 5.2. I honestly wouldn't take it. The matchup's not strong enough, and neither is his recent form. Scotty Barnes showing up on the radar again, and we're looking at his rebounds. My God, this guy frustrates me. The Knicks allow the 3rd fewest rebounds to power forward, so for once, we'd be looking at an under for Scotty Barnes, under 7.5. He's gone under 7.5 rebounds in 9 of his last 10 games. He's only averaging 5.2 rebounds. Up against Julius Randle and the Knicks, he's gone under this in 5 of 6 games against them. So, yeah, look, a strong lean to the under for Scotty Barnes, but I don't know. He's perfectly capable of getting 13, so he does worry me a little bit. I won't be making a play on that. Let's jump into the next one. It's the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Chicago Bulls, and the first player that we're looking at is Nikola Vucevic, and we're checking out his rebounds because the Grizzlies allow the 3rd most rebounds to centers. They're obviously quite thin in their front court. Now, Vuce, this is a very high line for him, 12.5. It's the highest it's been over the last 10 games. The highest we've seen is 11.5 as his prop. Now, what can we say about this? He's hit this in 3 of his last 10. He's averaging 10.6 rebounds per game. He's got 14 against the Raptors. In head-to-head matchups, 17 and 10 in his last 2 against them, but that was last March by the looks of it. But I wouldn't take him to cover this line, to be honest. But what I would consider taking is maybe a 10 rebound prop for Nikola Vucevic. But actually, maybe not. I think I was watching that Raptors game, and it looked like he jarred his back at one point, so that got me a little bit worried. And who knows how he feels today, right? So I'm not going to be taking Vucevic. Could be an injury that I may have seen, so I'm going to be avoiding that. Another one, though, is for DeMar DeRozan. We're looking at under in his points and assists. The Grizzlies allow the 6th least points and the 5th least assists to small forwards. He's only covered this line in 3 of his last 10, averaging 25.8. One head-to-head matchup against the Grizzlies, 38 points and assists. That consisted of 31 points and 7 assists. So he would have gone over both of his lines in that game. I don't like betting on DeMar DeRozan. He frustrates me as well. So let's move over to Alex Caruso. And we're looking at his PRA. And we're looking at an under in his PRA, believe it or not. The Grizzlies allow the 6th least points and the 5th least rebounds and assists to shooting guards. Now, Alex Caruso doesn't see much ball. He's on there for his defense and hustle. He's hit this line in 5 or 10 games, though, averaging 17.4 points, rebounds, and assists. 2 matchups against the Memphis Grizzlies last season, finished on 13 and 8 PRA. In those games, I just want to check his minutes. He played 26 and 24 minutes. Over his last 10, he's averaging 30 minutes per game. So he's definitely playing more. He's got a bigger role, which is why we see a higher line. Look, despite the matchup, part of the reason why the matchup is difficult is because the Memphis Grizzlies play slow and they've got a lot of hustlers. But those guys won't be defending Alex Caruso anyway. Kobe White and DeMar DeRozan will be drawing most of the attention, so I'm not sure if that's relevant for Alex Caruso. The next one, though, is Kobe White, and we're looking at his points and assists line, and we're looking at over 27.5. The Grizzlies allow the 7th most points and the most assists to point guards. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 games, averaging 27. He has gone under in his last 2 against Memphis, but he was coming off the bench in these 2 games. Zach LaVine is also out once again, so you might assume that Kobe White is going to do more. I actually briefly checked the numbers, and it wasn't too promising. So looking at his performances without Zach LaVine, he's only hit this line 2 out of his last 10 games without Zach LaVine in terms of his points or assists. So initially when Zach LaVine went out, Kobe White was a superstar, and then he started to slow down, and he was disappointing, to be honest. But I found what changed was the Bulls started to run their offense through DeMar DeRozan. His assist numbers and usage rate went up, and Kobe White became a spot-up shooter again. So just because Zach LaVine is out, it doesn't mean Kobe White's going to do better. You can see it here on this graph. If you just want to look at his assists, because The Grizzlies are giving up the most assists at the moment. His assist numbers haven't been great either. If we look at his assist numbers without Zach LaVine, yeah, look, he's capable, but he's not consistent enough for me. So won't be touching Kobe White in this one. The last one in this game is for Jaren Jackson Jr. And we're actually looking at it over in his rebounds prop. And I've made fun of him many times before about not being able to rebound any size and only averaging 5.5 rebounds. But he does attempt to block a lot of shots. He's hit this rebound line in 4 of his last 10, averaging 5.3. Up against the Chicago Bulls, he hit 8 in his last game. But look, if you've got a guy who's going to try to block every single shot in the paint, I'm not going to take him for a rebound prop ever. So I know the matchups is good, but the matchup is good because usually the power forwards are defending Patrick Williams, who sits on the corner. Jaren Jackson, if he does do that, he's going to go in and block some shots anyway. So not for me. Let's jump into the next game.
It's the Utah Jazz versus the Houston Rockets. Now, there's only one player that has a matchup worth calling out with this criteria. So I encourage you to rely on other factors such as form, minutes, opportunity, gut feel to make your picks. But that player is Jalen Green, and we're looking at under 4.5 rebounds. The Jazz allow the 6th least rebounds to shooting guards. Jalen Green's recent form's been great, though. He hit this in 7 of his last 10, averaging 5.2. In head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 1 of 3. But yeah, look, it's too conflicting for me, this data. Jalen Green's been rebounding very well. And when somebody allows less rebounds to a shooting guard, that really could be dependent on the type of shooting guard that they're playing. So some shooting guards don't rebound at all, and some do. So Jalen Green's one of the ones that does. So I wouldn't read too much into that. Whilst we're in here, I'll probably hit on some of the key players, not to talk about their matchup, but let's at least go through their form lines so you have a good idea. Şengün, if you want to look at his points, he's hit that in 4 of his last 10. His last matchup against Utah, he only finished on 20. So automatically, I'm thinking 23.5 is probably too high. Rebound-wise, his line's at 9.5. He's hit that in 4 of his last 10. His last matchup against the Jazz, he finished on 14 rebounds. So it might be something to consider. The Jazz are a good rebounding team, though. I think they allow the six least rebounds. His assists, he only had 3 assists the last time he versed the Jazz. His line's at 4.5, and he's only hit that in 4 of his last 10. So based on a lot of those not looking too great, the PRA, he's gone under quite often, and he also went under his PRA against the Utah Jazz last time. Who else is there? Fred VanVleet. Let's have a look at his points and assists. They're the key things that he normally would hit on. Points-wise, he's hit 5 of his last 10, averaging 16.6 points per game. 2 matchups against the Jazz, he had 34 and 17, but both of these when he played for the Raptors, so I wouldn't worry about that. Looking at his assists, very similar. And then in his last 10, his assist line is 9.5. Am I drunk? That seems really high to me. But look, he's perfectly capable of it. The Jazz do give up a lot of assists in general as a team. So yeah, might have to investigate Fred's assists a little bit more. Another one is Colin Sexton. So we hit on him recently. We smashed over his points. His line's 19.5, so it hasn't moved despite his strong form. He's hit that 7 out of his last 10 games, averaging 21.7 points per game. 2 matchup against the Rockets, 10 and 4 points, but obviously playing a lesser role. I can guarantee that. Yeah, 15 and 10 minutes in those 2 games. Looking at his last 10, he's averaging 24.2 minutes per game. So he still doesn't play a lot of minutes. He gets a lot of shots up, and he is quite consistent. The Houston Rockets were a great defensive team at the start of the year, but they're starting to move back when it comes to their defense. But I don't know. Do they have someone on the court that can slow Colin Sexton down? I don't know. I think that might be a play if you just love form. This guy's definitely on form. His points line is definitely something to consider. Lauri Markkanen is the unicorn from Utah. He's been scoring quite well recently. He's covered his line in his last 3. Rebound-wise, he's been killing his rebounds. He's covered in 7 straight games. And assist-wise, well, he doesn't pass the ball much, but lately he's been doing a bit of that too. Against Utah, against the Rockets, his rebounds have been okay. His points, he's got a 49-point game against the Rockets, so he might walk into this game with a little bit of confidence. So Laurie could be a good one. Let's jump into the very last game.
We're looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, and there's a lot of players that have good and bad matchups in this one. So let's get into it. The first one is Anthony Edwards. Looking at an under in his rebounds, 5.5, and that's because the Thunder allow the 8th least rebounds to shooting guards. Against the Oklahoma City Thunder, he's averaging 7.9 rebounds and hitting in 5 of 7 games. So already I'm skeptical of taking the under. Looking at his last 10, though, he's hit it in 3 of his last 10, averaging 5.3. So recent form isn't great. His form against the opponent is terrific, though. But at the same time, the Thunder aren't giving many rebounds away to shooting guards. I'm going to choose to stick away from that one. One that I may consider is his assists, though. So the Thunder allow the 6th most assists to shooting guards. Anthony Edwards covered this in 6 of his last 10 games, averaging 4.6 assists. He's hit it in 4 straight. In his head-to-head matchups against OKC, he's hit this 4 out of 7 games, averaging 4.9 assists. Whilst we're talking about Anthony Edwards, we might as well look at his points. He doesn't score many points against the Oklahoma City Thunder, but over his last 10 games, he's been getting busy, averaging 26.2, covering this line 6 times. So take of that what you will. The next one we're looking at is Jaden McDaniels, and we're looking at his points and his, assists? Points and rebounds, my apologies. We're looking at under 15.5, and that's because the Thunder allow the 7th fewest points and the 4th fewest rebounds to small forwards. Now, Jaden McDaniels covered in 4 of his last 10, averaging 14. Against the OKC Thunder, he's hit 2 out of 5 times. He's a great defender, Jaden McDaniels. He'll probably see a lot of time on Jalen Williams, I imagine. So Karl Anthony Towns can camp out the corner, but he might be preoccupied playing defense to get any rebounds. And scoring-wise, he may not be doing much of that either. But who else is there? Karl Anthony Towns. I just brought him up. This guy broke my heart. What was it? The last game he finished on 14 points. Needed him for 15 points. I think that was a $5,000 collect that went begging on the last leg. But anyway, Karl Anthony Towns, what am I talking about here? 21 points is what we're looking at. Over 21.5 points. The Thunder allow the 5th most points to power forwards. The problem here is that Karl Anthony Towns doesn't often score very much against them, and he cost me my parlay and my multi. But looking at his last 10, he's been an absolute beast, covering this line 8 of his last 10 games, but he didn't cover it when I needed him to. But points-wise, overall, look, he's doing great in his last 10. Hasn't done well against OKC, but the matchup is good. So it depends where are you going to put more stock, how he plays against a certain team or how he's been playing lately. Ideally, you want both to line up and say the same thing. So I think most of you might avoid Karl Anthony Towns because I definitely will. SGA, we're looking at under in his points and rebounds. And I hate this already, but this is what the matchup calls out. The Wolves allow the 4th fewest points and the 5th fewest rebounds to point guards. Up against the Timberwolves, he's covered this in 3 of 6, averaging 36.5. In his last 10 games, he's hit this 5 times, averaging 36.3. So the form tells me that the matchup doesn't matter, and fair enough. But if you want to break it down into his points or rebounds, points-wise looks very similar. He's actually scored quite well against them. He's covered this in 5 of 6 against Minnesota. Rebound-wise is where you might see some opportunities to take the under, but no, that's still not enough for me. Don't back the under in SGA. I think a same-game parlay to maybe 30 points. He's an absolute beast for 30 points. It's crazy. Who else do we have? Josh Giddey, cleared of, I don't even want to call it a certain charge, but he's cleared of whatever misdemeanor he was accused of. We're looking at under in his points and rebounds, though. Points and assists, my apologies. Looking at under in his points and assists, 14.5. The Wolves allow the 5th fewest points and the 6th fewest assists to shooting guards. And Josh Giddey's covered this in 6 of his last 10, averaging 18. And against the Minnesota Timberwolves, he's absolutely killed it. He's gone over in 5 of 7. But the key ones to look out for are these last 2, because these are games this year when he's been in a slightly lesser role. Last year, he was playing a lot more minutes, so he had a lot more opportunities. And you can see it in this black line here. It indicates what the line is for that game. His line was definitely much lower. So, yeah, Josh Giddey, I don't want to back an under in this one. His last game was awesome, and who knows how he's feeling coming into this one. So I won't touch that one. The next one is Jalen Williams, and we're going to see much of the same because a lot of these guys from OKC have been killing it lately. They've been playing really well, but now they're up against the Timberwolves, who's a difficult matchup in almost every position. So Jalen Williams, though, under 7.5 points, rebounds and assists. He's covered this in 9 straight games. But the Wolves allow the second fewest rebounds and the least assists to power forwards. Looking at how he's played against Minnesota, he's only covered in 1 of his last 6. So the 2 times he versed them this year, he finished on 6 and 4. But recently, he's really just leveled up. He's taken his game to another level. He's getting a lot more rebounds, a lot more assists. So, yeah, I'm not too sure how to play Jalen Williams in this one. The next one's for Chet Holmgren, and we're taking we're not taking it, but we're looking at the under in his rebounds, 6.5. So he's up against Rudy Gobert. The Wolves allow the second fewest rebounds to centers. So Chet's only covered this in 3 of his last 10, averaging 5.5 rebounds. In head-to-head matchups, though, he's covered it in one of 2 games so far this year, 4 in his last one, 8 in the first. I can't remember a time where I've taken Chet for rebounds ever because he's so inconsistent with it. Doesn't have the weight just yet, so I'm not saying take his under. I'm just saying don't bet on Chet's rebounds at all unless you know what's going to happen. The last one, though, we're sticking with Chet, though. It's his assists. So the Wolves allow the 3rd most assists to centers. He's done well against Minnesota with 6 and 5. And his last 10, trending upwards. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10 games. Look, I'll let you know, I absolutely love this play. It's going to be one of the plays that I talk about on this video. So I'll save more of my analysis until I get into that. So that's the preview on all of those games. My Lord, is my throat dry. But if you appreciate all the hard work, the effort, like the video, sub if you're new, drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. Have you got some leans already based off what I've told you? I'll let you know that I do have a lot of leans. There's about 8 other players that I'm looking at. I did hear everything that you guys wrote to me in the last video. You left some comments. It's pretty loud and clear that you guys want my final picks to be a pinned comment. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got one bet to share with you on this video, but it's a ladder play and it is about Chet. So hopefully you guys love it. I'll get straight into that and then we'll get into the recap as well. But let's talk about Chet Holmgren. I'm doing an assist ladder. We did it with AD not too long ago, so we're doing it with Chet. We're taking him over 2.5 assists. That's $1.72. We're taking him for 4 assists. That's $2.80. And 5 assists, which is $5. And I'm staking it this way. 2 units on his 2.5, 1 unit on his 4 assists, and half a unit on his 5 assists. I've designed it that way, whereas provided he gets his 2.5 assists, the other bets are covered. So we've got 3 units in total for Chet Holmgren to get some assists, but I'm really confident in his ability to get 2.5. So let's talk about his assists. Now, Chet, he's covered this line in 22 of 41 games this season. He's averaging 2.8 assists per game. His performance over his last 10 games has caught my attention. He's covered this line in 8 of 10, averaging 3.8 assists per game. I've had a look into some film to see how these were happening, and I noticed a trend in his performances. A majority of his assists come from paint touches, whether it's in the high post or he drives to the rim, but he ultimately loves to touch the paint. So I went back and also looked at his clips up against Rudy Gobert and the Wolves, and I found, very much of the same. Rudy doesn't have the lateral movement to stick with Chet on the perimeter, so Chet's got a lot of confidence taking him off the drive. When he gets that paint touch, he's often a little bit deterred. He's a bit scared to take the shot up against Rudy, so that forces Chet to kick the ball out to shooters, or he finds a lot of cutters to the rim. As you can see in a lot of these clips, that Josh Giddey is a great mover off the ball once Chet initiates his drive. Now, not only does Chet have excellent form over his last 10 games, his form against the Timberwolves will get you harder than a rock. In his last 2 games, against the Timberwolves, he's had 6 and 5 assist performances. Now, Chet's probably the 3rd option for the Thunder, and I assume the Wolves will be devising a plan to slow down SGA, to slow down Jalen Williams. He may not get a lot of touches, Chet, but the majority of his assists do come off layups, so he doesn't need many passes to cash this ladder. So let's go, Chet, and let's go, everybody watching this video. Let's go. Let's jump straight into the recap and talk about all the wonderful things that happened and all the shit things too. All right, we're jumping straight into bet analytics, and I've already got the filters out. So this is how the previous day went. We went 2.71 units profit, a 23% return on your investment. Provided this number stays higher than 10%, I'm going to be happy. But let's go through all the picks. The first one I spoke through was CJ McCollum to go over his points and assist line of 23.5. He took the shots. He just couldn't make them. He's 3, I think he was 1 from 6 from deep. He's shooting like 45% on the season. So a poor shooting game from him. Had he made those threes, would be a very different story. But at the same time, the Pels got blown out. So he didn't play as many minutes either. That also killed the value play. We took LaMelo Ball for over 25.5 points. I knew he was on a minutes restriction, but I also knew he was going to take a lot of shots. I did get worried when he got injured. Well, it appeared like he got injured after making his first layup in the game. He was a bit ginger, but I think he finished on 28 points. So he cashed that one home for us. The next one was I took Jokic for 25 and Maxey for 20. I was just going to take their overs, but then I was trying, I guess, not to put out so many bets. Well, it's not so many bets, but to put so much of my bankroll on the line, because I've found the more bets that I place, the more, I guess, the less likely I am to win. So I played it a little bit safe. Both of them absolutely smashed their lines anyway, but it was a good read nonetheless. We put 2 units on that, scooped up 2.1 units profit. We had a same game parlay where there was a script that I was thinking in my head that the 76ers are going to win this game. I don't know whether Embiid murders them again. I already had a bet on Maxey, but I thought if the Sixers are going to win, it means Banchero is not going to have a good game. And he went well under his points and assists. Tobias Harris, he finished on 12 points, so we got lucky with that one. But we hit that at $3, so another 2 units profit there. The value play on Banchero, we hit him under 26.5 points, which cashed easy. Over in his rebounds, that cashed easy. But we had under in his assists, 4.5, and I think he finished on 5 assists. But it was painfully close. So it was a pretty good read. But he got a lot of these assists early, so I got quite nervous looking at that. I'm just checking the box score right now just to confirm, and he finished on 6 assists, 14, 8, and 6. So bit disappointed in that one. We got close, but still finished profitable at the end of the day. And then we had DeJounte Murray. So once I noticed that Trey was out, I put the play up on DeJounte. His line was also moved to 12.5, but he covered both anyway. So we got 1.56 units profit out of DeJounte, and then I ran a value play on him. It was only $4.50. He went under his points. He went well over his assists, but he couldn't get the rebounds for us. I think he only finished on 3, so 2 rebounds short, which was unfortunate. But what I did think about today is I do have a script in my mind for a lot of games, and that's how I tend to make my picks. I guess for, I think, 1 or 2 games that are coming up, I do have a script in my mind of how it's going to be. So check the pin comments. I'll probably have a few same game parlays or multis in there, which kind of devises my script of who wins, who plays good, and who plays bad. Put them all together, and hopefully the script is being read by all the players and it all delivers for us. But that's the recap. Things are looking really good. Let me look at the season. We're at 63 units profit, 12.5% return on your investment. So things are looking great. The other thing, if you're still watching and you made it this far, I'm actually on the lookout for some YouTubers to collaborate with. And I know a lot of you guys don't only watch mine. You're probably watching others. So please let me know in the comment section which YouTubers should I reach out to do a little bit of a collaboration on, get some more exposure, learn a few things, I hope. But that's a wrap on today's video. It's been a few hours in the making. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.